Chol Soo Lee was born during the aftermath of the Korean War into a broken family. He was born out of wedlock and was left by his mother, who married an American soldier and fled to the US. In 1964, his mother came back to Korea, and at the age of 12, Chol Soo Lee immigrated to the US. He lived in San Francisco with his mother and was sent to a school that was geared toward Chinese students. At the school, he was often bullied, and in an incident with some other students, he was sent to the principal's office. An altercation with the principal got him sent to juvie. In juvie, Chol Soo Lee acted as if he was going to commit suicide as a means to gain attention, but instead got him sent to a psych ward. In the psych ward, the doctors forced him medication and misdiagnosed him with schizophrenia. He was released 3 months later when the doctors realized he just couldn't speak good English. Even as a young boy, Chol Soo Lee was ousted by the system and given little to no support. The system would cheat Chol Soo Lee again in 1973 when he was misidentified and arrested for the murder of Yip Yi Tak. At the time of his arrest, Chol Soo Lee was 21 years old and living in Chinatown, San Francisco. Yip Yi Tak was shot on the street corner of Chinatown, and 3 out of the 6 eyewitnesses from the scene identified Chol Soo Lee as the killer. However, those eyewitnesses were all white tourists and would have been subjected to cross-race effect, which is the idea that people can easily recognize others in their racial group, meaning that it would be harder for them to accurately identify the suspects because they are from different racial groups. Coincidentally, Chol Soo Lee was arrested prior to the murder due to a suspicious occurrence, to which he accidentally shot off a gun that he had gotten from his manager. The gun was shot off in his apartment and left a bullet hole in his wall. The gun Chol Soo Lee shot off was a .38 caliber and matched the gun from the crime scene. But the barrel configuration of the 2 guns were different, meaning that they were not the same. Following the murder, the authorities detained Chol Soo Lee because he fit the description of a Chinese man, when he was actually Korean. Despite all this, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sent to dual vocational institution in Tracy, California. In 1977, he was caught in a prison altercation which led to the death of Morris Needham, a neo-Nazi. Although Chol Soo Lee was practicing self-defense, he was convicted of double murder and sentenced to death row. Chol Soo Lee's story and the events that led to his conviction raised the attention of K.W. Lee, an investigative journalist. K.W. Lee was interested in Chol Soo Lee's case and had the chance to talk to him in prison. He became very fond of Chol Soo and believed him to be innocent. So, in 1978, he wrote a 2-part investigative article, Lost in a Strange Culture and the Alice in Chinatown Murder Case, for the Sacramento Union.
This young boy was condemned as insane. There were no support system, no counselors, no school teachers, nobody. Absolutely, he was on his own. The criminal justice system had no incentive to really find out, about this boy and his cultural and language background.
K.W. Lee's article not only raised awareness of Chol Soo Lee's case, but of the injustice that many Asian Americans had experienced in the U.S.
And that's why I felt, it was my calling to make some small dent in that war of ignorance and insensitivity.
Ultimately, Chol Soo Lee's case became an outlet for Asian Americans to voice their frustration and anger, and sparked a Pan-Asian movement.
So this notion of a Pan-Asian movement is then, an Asian American identity is one that's Pan-Asian, meaning it's not just focusing on one particular ethnic group, right? So that in itself is coalitional. And so the movement, in many ways, it was interracial, but it's also about building solidarity within Asian American communities, because we tend to think of Asian American communities as just a given, right? But there is so much diversity within Asian American community, right? And so this is also sort of then building solidarities within Asian American communities across all these differences in ethnicity, class, religion, language, and so on.
This movement brought up student activists, elderly immigrants, religious leaders and organizations, business owners, social workers, attorneys, and mass media organizations and professionals in the Bay Area, as well as across the country and across the world in Asian countries such as Korea and Japan. The Asian community would go on to hire Leonard Weinglass to work as a defense attorney for Chol Soo Lee. Later on, Weinglass would have to withdraw from the case, but in his place came J. Tony Serra and Stuart Hanlon, who joined the defense team. Alongside them was a friend of Chol Soo Lee, Renko Yamada, who studied to become a defense attorney after Chol Soo Lee's arrest. In July of 1978, Chol Soo Lee's defense team filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, which is a legal action that protects incarcerated people from unlawful imprisonment. Chol Soo Lee was granted a retrial, which ended in disappointment as he was found guilty again and sent back to prison. Later on, the defense team would be able to uncover a new eyewitness, Stephen Lau, who was an Asian eyewitness who saw the killer walk away from the crime scene. Due to his background, Lau would not be subjected to the cross-race effect, making him a quality eyewitness. Due to this new evidence, Chol Soo Lee was granted a retrial that started on August 11, 1982. By the help of his defense team, he was acquitted and released from prison on March 28, 1983, after being confined for 10 years. Many people don't know or remember Chol Soo Lee and his story, but his case serves as an example of the court system's failing to bring justice to minorities and Asians such as him. All the evidence was pointing away from Chol Soo Lee being the suspect, and more towards his innocence, yet the authorities and the court chose to ignore it.
A lot of people say I was not an angel on outside. At the same time, I was not the devil. But whatever I was on outside does not justify to frame a person to put him in prison for murder he did not commit. That is no excuse.
Oftentimes, for young people, there's oftentimes when we talk about institutionalized inequalities, it's something that's happened, that's so embedded that leaves us no choice to accept it, right? It sort of becomes that's the way things are. How are we gonna change things? So we feel powerless or paralyzed or even indifferent. Like, what difference is one person going to be made, right? That it's impossible to make any difference. So it leaves us complacent, particularly around the criminal justice system, where we often bring sort of our preconceptions that these are bad people, right? That they're guilty of crimes. So here, the Chol Soo Lee movement shows the possibilities for young people to get involved, to actually bring about change.
Chol Soo Lee's case greatly impacted the Asian community, as it inspired many young Asian Americans to become social workers, to help fight against future injustice and discrimination, which we still see happening today.